This lesson will focus on the animal group called Ecdysozoa. This includes all of the animals that are able to go through what's called ecdysis, or molting an exoskeleton. Now, there is much debate whether or not to include phylum Nematoda or the roundworms in this group. Molecular evidence suggests that they should be with the Ecdysozoans, but again, it is still being debated among taxonomists. All nematodes are pseudocoelomate, which means that they have a body cavity, but it is incompletely lined by the mesoderm. They also have a complete digestive system, which means that they have both a mouth and an anus. Their nervous system consists of a very simple brain with just 4 nerves that run along the length of the body. Roundworms are very numerous and abundant throughout the planet, and many of them are parasitic. The major group in Ecdysozoa are the arthropods. Arthropods include things like insects, crustaceans, and spiders. We'll primarily focus on the crustaceans, though, being a marine science class. The characteristics of arthropods include the fact that they have an exoskeleton that's made of a light, hard substance called chitin. Being ecdysozoans, all arthropods go through molting, which means they shed their old exoskeleton in order to be able to grow into a larger animal. In the picture in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you can see a blue crab pulling itself out of the back of its shell. This is an example of molting. All arthropods also have a segmented body, and depending on the class of arthropod, there will be different numbers of segments. For example, crabs, which are crustaceans, have several segments, but often their body segments are covered by a large shell called a carapace, which we'll talk about later. Arachnids, or spiders, tend to have 2 primary body segments. Insects tend to have 3, such as that bumblebee that's pictured there in the lower right-hand corner. And centipedes and millipedes have many different segments. And a big characteristic of arthropods are the jointed appendages, or the jointed legs that they walk on. In fact, this is where they get their name, Arthropoda, which means jointed foot. All arthropods have an open circulatory system. They do have a heart, but it pumps blood through vessels, but then into the body cavity. So it is considered to be an open circulatory. Continuing with arthropod characteristics, we can focus now on the nervous system of arthropods, which is of some interest. Their nervous system does include a brain of fused ganglia. Ganglia are nerve clusters, and of course this simple brain is located towards the anterior part of the animal, or towards the head. They also have paired ventral nerve cords. Ventral means they run along the belly, and this is different than vertebrates such as ourselves. Our main nerve cord, our spinal cord, runs along our dorsal side, or our back. In arthropods, that nerve cord runs ventrally along the belly, and it's also paired, and it resembles a ladder. You will see what this looks like when we dissect the crayfish. Another interesting note about the arthropod nervous system is their compound eyes. These eyes are much different than ours because they consist of thousands of individual photoreceptors. So they're much different than ours because they're more designed to give the animal a very large view, a lot of peripheral vision, and they detect movement, which is why it's so difficult to try to sneak up on a fly and get it, because it really is sensitive to the movement of your hands or a fly swatter if you have that. You can see a picture of compound eyes in the lower right-hand corner. Those are the compound eyes of a mantis shrimp. So we'll talk more about those at another time as well. In the lower left-hand corner of the screen, you can see the nervous system that I was talking about running along the ventral surface of a grasshopper. And if we look at just the nervous system itself, notice there are 2 main nerve cords that run from the brain and through the subesophageal ganglion. And notice there's a cluster or ganglia of nerve cells for each segment. Again, this is similar to what you'll see in the crayfish dissection. We're now going to start talking about the different types of marine arthropods. Arthropods are very numerous on planet Earth, and you could spend an entire course in school talking about all the different types. But we're just going to focus on some of the general ones we find in the ocean. So the first subphylum of arthropods is Chelicerata. Now this subphylum does include spiders and scorpions, although these are terrestrial, so we're not really going to focus on them. But there are two classes of interest for marine scientists, and that is class Merostomata, which includes the horseshoe crabs, which you see in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. It also includes class Pycnogonida, which are the sea spiders, and they're pictured on the right. Now these sea spiders are not arachnids, so they're not true spiders, but they superficially look like spiders, having 4 paired legs for the most part. Some have more. And they kind of walk around like spiders, so they get that name, sea spider. But these are harmless and cannot bite you like some of the arachnids that we're familiar with. Another major subphylum of phylum Arthropoda is subphylum Crustacea. These are the crustaceans which we think about when we look at shrimp and crabs and lobsters and such. So there are a number of classes that we're going to be responsible for becoming familiar with in this unit. The first class of crustaceans is Branchiopoda. Now, these are the brine shrimp, and they may be familiar to you because one of the first labs we did in this class was the hatching of brine shrimp, or sea monkeys. You can see an adult brine shrimp there on the left-hand side. A second class of crustaceans is class Maxillopoda, which includes the barnacles, and they're pictured on the right. Now, barnacles are an interesting crustacean because, again, they are related to shrimp and crabs, except they're sessile, meaning they cannot move. They're firmly attached to a hard rock, and sometimes even whales. They have a very unusual lifestyle. They actually, when they become adults, they fuse or cement their head to a hard surface. They form shells around them, and then they use their legs to kick food into their mouths. So they're filter feeders on a rock or a whale, and so they're a very unusual type of. Another class of crustaceans are the ostracods, class Ostracoda, which includes the seed shrimp. They get this name because they're small and they have clam-like shells that surround their body. So they almost look like they could be bivalves, but they're not. They're actually crustaceans that have a shell around them. And you can see one picture in the upper right-hand corner of this screen. They tend to be very small, like seeds, and that's where they get their name. Now, the big class that we're going to study a lot of in this class, or study a lot, is class Malacostraca. This is the one that includes the lobsters, crabs, and shrimp. So we'll talk more about them in the activity and labs that we are going to take a look at in the following days.